um, what happens is we kind of come into this physical world, these physical bodies, with intentions that we have kind of forgotten along the way, because we pop into the real world, and we have families and cultures and friends who influence us, all well intentioned. No, rarely someone coming at you maliciously, right? So they want to offer you good advice. They were here before you got here. They think they've got some things figured out. They like to share that stuff with you. So a lot of us get a little mixed up and a little confused as we start to enter, adolescence, and then adulthood, and then, it never kind of quits, right? So when we start to kind of question, like, what do I like, and what do I want, and what brings me joy, and what makes my heart sing, and where are my passions, and what lights me up from the inside, and what's exciting, and what do I get enthusiastic about? When we really let ourselves kind of explore those types of questions and lean into that, that's really important. Leaning into it and allowing it and then following it. That's when life becomes really fun and exciting and alive and enthusiastic. And that's when you hear people wake up and they jump out of bed because they can't wait for the day to start. So that's what I think leads to a joyful life. And it all kind of comes from really knowing your inner self, because only you know what you like. Only you know where your passion is. Only you know what your inner wisdom is telling you. So um, that's when it gets exciting and sweet. Now, on the flip side, this person asked about, well, what gets in the way of that? Um, and typically that's our own thoughts. That's our own mental chatter that's going on in our heads that are saying things like you're not good enough, or you don't know what you're doing, or someone else is doing it better, or oh gosh, all the other junk that can cloud our inner wisdom, right? Our guidance. And so that's the stuff that kind of really, it becomes like a thunderstorm in your head, and that can get your attention. Also, other things can get your attention that cloud that, and that's other people's opinions. That's culture's opinions. That's mainstream America, or wherever you happen to be, whatever culture you happen to be invested in. We can start to kind of look outside ourselves for that guidance. And when we do that, man, do we just kind of make it hard for ourselves. And so thoughts and that inner chatter, and then even that stuff out here that is distracting, can kind of impede our own joyful path.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I remember reading something a while ago that said the thing that gets in our way is the picture of how we think it's supposed to be. And
Yes.
so that's something that I've tried to bring with me and try to remember, is that, things can be going really well, but not at all like I thought they would. And that doesn't dampen that joy, and it doesn't make it not an accomplishment. If you can stop picturing how you think it's supposed to look, then it encourages you and allows you to really accept and take joy in how things end up turning out. And I feel like that's, something that's really helped me over the years.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring that up, because a lot of people will talk about visualization for manifestation. They'll talk about like getting a picture in your mind's eye and then allowing that to kind of be attracted into your life, which visualization, let me just say a couple of things about that, is great to get you to the point of feeling the energy of whatever that thing is. So if when you visualize, like I don't know, say you want to um, be a rock star. And so you think, oh my God, wouldn't it be great to be like Beyonce? And that gets you excited and all pumped up and thrilled about possibilities and potential. That's fantastic. So, what I suggest is hold on to the feeling of that, but let the image of it go. So, don't have to be so specific with what brings you joy, that it has to be that thing, you the rock star on the mega stage at the giant stadium in New York. I mean, don't make it have to be that thing that brings you joy, but it's that feeling sensation. And if you can hone in on the feeling of it, there's lots of things along the way that will match that and will start to kind of appear in your life. if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea of holding on to the feeling. Okay, so this next person had written in saying, I'm not feeling excited about my current job, but I can't afford to pivot right now. How can I reduce the impact that this has on my mood? I feel like this is a kind of a really common thing for a lot of people to experience, especially when you're in a place where, like most of us usually are, where you can't afford to just be like, chuck it all and try something else.
Sure, sure. Well, that would be counterproductive, right? Because it would throw you into fear and panic and what am I going to do next and all those things, which doesn't lead to a joyful life. And that's the goal. So when you're finding yourself in a spot where you don't want to be, um, what we tend to do as humans is then we start to pick it apart, right? We're like, well, I've got a boss that sucks, and I've got a coworker that's gossipy, and I'm overwhelmed with too much to do. I mean, we start to pick it apart and name all the reasons why we don't like it, which then is like almost soul crushing because it's just, oh, you got to like pull yourself out of bed and get yourself to the office and do the stuff you don't want to do. But in order to pivot and to find that route to joy, in really in order to find that next career move that's going to bring you happiness and joy, is you've got to find it within the job that you're in. And I know that kind of is sucks, and you're like, I don't want to do that. But that's the way forward because first of all, what I find is you don't want to enter the entanglement with your old job that's not serving you anymore. And when you do that, it's when you push against it, when you resist what is. And so if you stop resisting what is and you just accept, okay, so I'm here and it's okay. And, it's a paycheck and it's paying the bills and you start listing those things that you do like about your job that make it a little more pleasant, a little more doable to do, then you'll start to attract things into your life that are more pleasant and more doable. And then as you start to even shift that, the energy increases. So what you're looking at is just what we were talking about before with the visualization. You're looking for the feeling of it. So if you're hating your job right now and you're doing the job search to find something better, you're not going to like anything that's coming to you because you've got this whole cloud of energy around about, I don't like what I'm doing, I don't like what I'm doing, and you're going to get more stuff that you don't like what you're doing. So you've got to find the things within the job that you do like. I like working with people, or, maybe you like going to an office, or what if you're working from home? You like having your own space. You like going to work in your pajamas. Like you start to really find those little things that are helpful, that help shift your own attitude, your own mood, because that's what attracts the next thing.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really good point. I mean, I've had a lot of jobs and a lot of like weird like jumps from this field to that industry and back and forth. And I feel like, yeah, you're right. It's a lot easier to try and find the small things that you do like about the job, because that's the kind of stuff that carries you through, right? It's the kind of stuff that helps you when you have just one of those soul sucking days, nothing goes right, and you're seemingly 40 minutes late and 18 paragraphs short on everything you're trying to do. So thank you for that. I think that's a really good thing to take with us from today's talk.
Well, yeah, it's showing up for you. So if you just try to remember that this is somehow for me, and I'm going to take this and it's going to lead to something else, then it makes it gives you back your power, and you don't feel like a victim of a bad job. You're empowering yourself to do a good job where you are, so you can do a great job in the next wonderful thing that you find. So you're just kind of taking back your power when you switch your perspective like that.
Thank you for that. I love that idea. All right. So this next person had asked, how can we manufacture personal joy in a seemingly joyless world? Now, I know how I've done this over the last couple of years, but I'm really interested to see what your take is on this.
Yeah, so I have lots of things to say about that. So first of all, joy is always an inside job. So we would, and I'm not saying that things can't contribute to your joy, like, a beautiful sunset or the smell of puppy breath or, an ice cream cone. Like, I totally get it. Some things, up the joy level. But joy, true joy, is something that comes from the inside, and it's something that you have to foster from within. And then everything else just adds to that. So when we get quiet, when we tune into our inner selves, there's a natural, like, wellspring of well-being. And sometimes it can feel like calm or peace or bliss. Sometimes it can feel like enthusiasm and exuberance and joy. It's this kind of continuum of really wonderful emotions that they feel like, energy feels like an emotion in a body, right? So it's these wonderful energies that feel like emotions that actually come from inside. And so all of that has a lot to do with how you're talking to yourself in those quiet moments, what you're focused on. Are you entangling with other energies that, like, are you still worried about a problem that you brought home from work that's now no longer at work? Are you trying to fix something that's not yours to fix? Are you matching somebody else's energy in your own home who's had a bad day and now all of a sudden you're having a bad day? Like, it's really taking exquisite care of our inner self. It's taking exquisite care of our thoughts and how we feel and what we focus on, and not just letting it be haphazard because that's what's grabbing our attention. So it's honoring that part of ourselves. And so sometimes that means, turning off the TV so you're not watching the nightly news. And sometimes that means, going outside to watch a sunset because it just makes you feel good, or getting on your bicycle and just riding around the block. I mean, there are things that we can do that are self care. But, and I don't, I'm a proponent. If action is what gets you to that wonderful state of mind, use the action first. If it's easier for you to flip your perspective and then have inspired action, do that. But, because they're both hopefully leading to the same thing, which is your own peace of mind, your own sense of well being. And that's always something that you have to foster on the inside, because if you leave it to a world out there, I mean, it's not going to happen. There's too many agendas and too many people who want too many different things and who want your attention on so many different issues and obstacles. So you got to take care of you first.
No, I fully support that idea. I remember watching a Red Table Talk back before they had it on cable TV, and it was just an online thing. And one of the things that Jada Pinkett Smith was talking about is that you can't help other people if you're not helping yourself first. If you can't get water from a well that's empty. So if you're trying to help other people or even just help yourself, if you're not starting with you, then you can't bring anything else to anybody else besides yourself.
Yeah, if your will is not, it's nothing to give anybody else. So that's for sure.
Absolutely. All right. So while we are trying to manufacture this personal joy, what is the best way to avoid negative feelings?
Well, negative feelings are part of the beautiful human spectrum. So, if your goal is to avoid negative feelings, then don't have them, right? That's it. But most of us will, what happens is we find ourselves in the state of sadness or grief or frustration or irritation or whatever it happens to be. It can be, anything on that spectrum. And then we feel it and we're like, oh, we got to get rid of this. Oh, we don't want to feel this. And so we try to push it away, which just makes it dig in deeper because we're focused on it. So if you're finding yourself, a couple of things, if you're already there in the negativity and you're noticing it almost too late, you're already irritated, you're already overwhelmed. At that point, you just got to accept that's where you are. Okay, I'm feeling this. It's okay. If something's a true emotion and you're not adding any mental story to it, the chatter's not what's keeping it going, it will pass in like 90 seconds. It'll almost like flow through your energy system. And so you just got to accept it. Okay, I'm overwhelmed. This is what it feels like to be overwhelmed in the body. This is what stress muscles feel like. This is what a overworking mind feels like. If you'll just accept it, it will pass faster than resisting it. Now, if you're not in a negative spot and you don't want to go there, then you catch it early, right? So you catch it in your mental chatter. The mind is so helpful and focus, because that's what we are as humans. We focus, we're aware, we're consciousness. And so that's what consciousness does. It wants to focus. So give it something that you want it to focus on. So if you're, I don't care if that's daydreaming, or if that is meditating, or if that is, an intention or a mantra that you have, whatever helps you kind of stay in that flow, then focus there, because it, you're this, you are awareness. So that by your nature, you want to focus. So when you notice yourself focusing on something you don't want, you just gently shift your attention.
I love what you started at the beginning to say about negative feelings. And I feel like that's something that's very lost, especially in American culture, where, just because you're feeling something negative, that's okay. Like, we're not supposed to be happy, happy, happy all the time, because otherwise happiness doesn't mean anything. But if you are, it's like grief. A lot of people want to, kind of push past it and get through it really quickly because it doesn't feel good. And I get it. But those experiences of like, negative emotion are what make us human, but they're also what allows us to appreciate when we don't feel like that anymore. And just because you're feeling like that now, nothing like this lasts forever. So it could be a situation, like you said, where you kind of have to acknowledge it, and if not embrace it, at least stop fighting it and realize that, like, this is important to go through, because then the next time this happens to you, it won't be this big shock of like, well, what is this? What am I feeling? What's going on? And it makes it a lot easier to kind of ride that wave and then get past.
Yeah, I mean, if you're feeling the negative emotion, you really have no choice but to feel it. I mean, you're in it. So if you try to deny it or push it away, it's just going to grow stronger. And it's so that's key. But I do want to talk about, you can get to a point. You touched on how you have to have one thing. You have to have happiness. You have to have negativity to enjoy happiness. Um, as someone opens up more and more, and they get more and more comfortable with the human spectrum, and also with this energy spectrum, your dips aren't so strong. You'll still have these little dips, but they don't have to be these giant ups and downs. They can be much subtler, and much you can stay on one end of the continuum longer, and for longer stretches. So that's when you hear masters talk about bliss and enlightenment and awakening. That is not for just a few people, that's for everybody. So I like to debunk that myth. It's possible for everybody. And um, so yes, you can have these ups and downs, but they can also even themselves out. So the more you practice, and the more you pay attention, and the more you stay self-aware, it gets easier, and the less, you don't have to go so deep in order to catch it. Sometimes it has to get so strong in order to catch it. It doesn't have to get that strong with more awareness.
Okay. So this next person had written in saying, I tend to have long periods of feeling down. I've tried everything from therapy to mindfulness, and it doesn't really seem to work. Do you have any tips that may help us get out of those dark places?
Well, it's kind of piggybacking on what we were just talking about. So when you're in it, um, once you're so far in it, it's hard to climb back out of it. With it, just going to have to take its time and almost pass, kind of like the weather passes. It too will pass, and so you just wait for that storm cloud to go. Um, and what I would encourage this person to do is to be more aware of when they're tipping that way, because if this happens frequently, they can feel it coming on. And so instead of resisting, you don't have to resist it, because that will just make it stronger, and it will throw you into kind of fear and panic of like, oh my God, here it's coming and I don't know what to do. So you just say, oh, I recognize this. I recognize this sensation, because it's going to start with our thoughts. It's going to start with our emotions. Then it's going to start to go into behavior. Like maybe she doesn't get out of bed, or maybe whatever her behavior happens to be. So you just want to catch it early. And that's the best thing that she can do. And so when she notices it, then she can make subtle shifts of what feels like self compassion to her. And that's different for everybody. I mean, sometimes for some folks, that's reaching out to a friend and having a phone conversation. Sometimes that's watching a goofy movie on Netflix. Sometimes that's just chilling out with your dog. It just depends on what kind of nourishes you. But I would encourage her to pay attention and to try to catch it early if she can.
Yeah, this is something that I struggle with a lot, actually. I mean, I have like major depression and bipolar disorder that I deal with, but it's been a long, a long road to like coming to understand these things. But something that has helped me is I use a daily mood tracker, and it breaks it down into mood and energy, and you can kind of customize things there. But it's also really helped me to try and recognize those, like, not necessarily triggers, but like the symptoms that I'm getting into, kind of like a downward slope. And for me personally, without the tracker, it's really hard for me to kind of see these things. And it gets more clear, once you're past it. But the triggers and the signs and symptoms of this is happening don't really seem to make a ton of sense until you're already past it.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, if something like that would help to kind of, like you said, like, get to know more so that you can kind of see these things coming. Forewarned is forearmed, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a great point, Meg, that one thing that I think is really important for people to know who have these big swings is, number one, you have. So I'm an intuitive and empath, so I can't not talk about energy and moods without talking about your soul self and all that good stuff. It's just part of the package. So everybody's soul journey is different, and everybody's soul came in with an intention. And what we as humans might not understand from this very human limited brain that we have, we don't always get this bigger, broader picture. And so sometimes souls want to experience the extremes of energy, and they think that's a very cool experience and a very grand adventure. As the human, sometimes that feels like a whole lot to take on. But there's two parts of you, and you're never getting it wrong. So whenever someone's in this kind of lower space or this denser vibration or these thick emotions, they're not in a wrong place. So it's important to remember that as the human, you're not doing anything wrong, you're not getting it wrong, you're okay to experience these things. And so that's, if you kind of keep that grander perspective, that broader perspective of soul's intentions, it'll help ease it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
All right, I just want to flag for everybody, we only have 30 minutes left in today's session. So if you do have a question that you'd like to raise, please feel free to. I'm happy to hold some space here in case anybody would like to come off mute to talk, or to ask a question or add a comment. And while we're holding that space, I will kind of queue up the next question from our pre-submitted list. So if you'd like to come off mute to participate, please feel free to. No takers? Okay. I know it can feel very intimidating to be the first one, so don't worry about that. But like I said, you do have 30 minutes left in case you have something occurs to you that you'd like to ask Michelle directly. Okay, so the next person that had written in, I just muted myself, sorry. The next person that had written in said, I feel like I've always been the good daughter, the good employee, the good wife. I feel like I don't even know myself anymore. How can I connect with my passions and identify with what makes me feel joyful?
So that's a great question, because I think a lot of us in our culture have bought into that paradigm of being the good girl, and she did a great job of saying the good wife, the good employee, the good daughter, the good mom. I mean, we kind of bought into that paradigm, and then we built an image of what that should look like. So that's exactly what we talked about at the beginning of the call, is how we're taught certain things by our culture, by our family, by our friends, by our community, that we don't question initially, because it's just, we think it's how it is. And then we have all these outside influences showing us what that should look like, right? So when we start to question, deeply question, like, what brings me joy and what makes me happy and what brings me peace, that's when we really get It's part of the awakening process. It's part of waking up from this kind of mental program that you subscribe to that you didn't even know you were subscribing to. And we all do it pretty much to one extent or the other. And so, number one, bravo for whoever this is for starting to question all that, because that's part of your inner guidance getting your attention, your soul self saying, hey, remember me, we got stuff we want to do here. And so you start to pay attention to the little things, and then you build on that. And it's going to sound silly, but you'll have these intuitive flashes, you'll have these kind of gut instincts, you'll have these little inner knowings that you'll want to go, I don't know, instead of join the carpool line, you want to stop in this little store real fast. And I can hear all the alarms going off and all the moms out there of like, well, that's not what you're supposed to do. And, that's not being a good mom. Well, it all works out. So there's always this synchronicity and this good timing that comes into play. And if we trust our intuition just for the half a second of the pair of earrings that you found in the little boutique that's going to light you up for that day versus having to be the first person in the carpool line, being the good mom. It's this little stuff that happens that we discount, that we say, oh, it's no big deal. But that's what builds the momentum of finding the big stuff. So it's picking up, the book about intuition in the bookstore, and instead of putting it back on the shelf, or it's meeting your friend for coffee when normally you wouldn't have time because you have all this laundry to do. It's the little stuff that we think is too simple that to add up to a joyful life. But all those little bitty tiny things, that's what the joy is about. It's in the meantime. We think it's this big kind of like big poof that's going to happen, but it's all these little bitty things along the way that bring us joy, that help to elevate our joy, that we just don't give enough credit to. And so that's what I would encourage her to do, because she's going to have a whole lot of paradigms that she's shifting through. She's going to have a whole lot of expectations from others and herself that she's shifting through. So there's a whole lot of questioning our thoughts, and there's a whole lot of leaning into, what would I like to do now? What would I like to do now? And that's probably going to be the most helpful question for her to ask herself.
Well, especially, from the way I read this question, it sounds not only like this is a person who, is going to, it sounds like somebody who over the years has kind of pared back on the things that they personally want to do, because it doesn't necessarily benefit, the family or the relationship or the business. And that's okay. I mean, people do that. You have to make sacrifices sometimes to get the success or to get like the thing that you're trying to achieve. But this is, if this is a situation where they really want to start connecting with their passions and figure out what makes them happy, what makes them joyful, that's going to require stepping out of your comfort zone. That's going to require, if you have like you said, if you have an impulse to stop in to a boutique or something instead of, being first in the carpool lane, you're going to have to take those leaps. You're going to have to try new things to figure out what brings you joy, because the things that you're doing right now are clearly not bringing you joy, or you're not letting yourself feel joy from them.
Yeah. So yes. So what happens though, most people, when they have stopped listening to themselves, they don't even really know what they want next. It's too big. It's too hard to try to figure out. And then they get into this, oh, I got to figure out what I want before I can take the next step. And I got to know what I'm doing. And you get into this whole kind of logical, analytical loop instead of following your intuition, which is going to come in bursts of insight. So when she starts to really ask herself minute by minute, like literally, what do I want? What do I want for breakfast? What do I really want for breakfast? Not what I think I should eat, not the protein bar that someone else says I should eat. What do I want for breakfast? You really have to start, because you have your own inner wisdom and you have your own inner guidance, and you just have to start to pay attention to it. We've programmed ourselves out of it. So it's little things minute by minute that will help her kind of, number one, get in touch with what she wants. Number two, learn how to trust that information that comes. And then number three, to lean into it. And I just want to say one thing about sacrifices. We have to, you mentioned that sometimes we have to sacrifice one thing for the other. No. You don't have to do that. If you live intuitively, you're going to just be guided from one thing to the next and one thing to the next. And nothing's ever going to feel like a sacrifice because it wasn't meant for you. We get into this whole sacrifice and responsibility thing because we're living these lives that we don't really want to live. And so then we put this martyrdom on it, like, oh, I'm a good girl because I sacrificed this. I mean, don't do that. No, no, no. Just say I don't want to. You empower yourself that it can be that easy and it can be this simple. Spirit does not want to complicate our lives. Spirit is always trying to get you, it's simple. It's simple. It's not meant to be complicated or effort or struggle. That's what we humans like to do.
Yes, I think overcomplicating things is probably one of my like secret superpowers for sure.
It's a lot of people, so.
Yeah. All right, so we do have some questions coming up in the chat. One person had asked if you have any advice for preparing for grief or dealing with it once it happens. In particular, this person is concerned about passing of their parents.
Yeah. So, you can't prepare for grief. It's going to happen, right? And it's going to hit you when it hits you. And the reason I say that is because she's trying to control the how she's going to feel. That's a question about controlling, about how you're going to deal with it. If I prepare myself, then it'll make it easier.
Yeah, trying to control something or control a segment of something that you cannot control.
Right. So, and that's understandable because she's scared. It's fear. It's coming from that place, and that's okay. So I have a couple of things to say about that. Number one, when someone leaves this physical plane, when they take that last breath, that pop that we feel, that whether you're with them or not, there's almost like a shifting that happens, and that's just their energy transforming from a physical form into something else. And you will feel that, especially if you're close to someone. You'll feel that subtle shift. And it freaks people out a little bit, but all it is a shift in form, because by nature they are energy. They were energy before they came into this body, they're energy when they leave this body. And so they're just shifting form. And what scares her is that she doesn't know exactly what that next form is going to be. So there's a tendency to want to, we hop into grief, And so the emotion of grieving, what she's grieving and what this person is anticipating is the grief of their physical person not being there anymore, of not being able to touch them or hear them or be with them. But that's still possible. And you hear all of these stories of people who have dreams, or a song comes on that was the loved one's favorite song, or they don't leave, and they have a better vantage point of helping you and being with you once they pass than they do in this physical body, because they let go of all their stuff, all their paradigms, all their limiting beliefs, all their stuff. So she's going to grieve, because that's what humans do. It's part of our culture, and allow it and accept it and let it in. It's a true emotion. Grief without the mental story, it will come in waves, but it will leave too. She can trust that it will leave. She won't get mired down in it if she doesn't attach the story to it. And then when she allows herself to kind of float back up into a place of well-being, even if it's just for a minute or two, or just periods of time for her day, that's when these messages and synchronicities and knowings will come in, and that will let her know that she is still connected to that person. So, but you have to be in a vibration, a frequency where you can hear it, where your awareness will focus on it, and the grief will keep her out of that frequency. So it's just going to be a toggle for a little while, and it's just an acceptance of that toggle.
Yeah, and it's also, it seems like another situation where, thinking that you can plan ahead for it, or trying to picture what you need to expect is probably not going to be helpful, because like you said, everybody grieves in a different way, right? And just because you grieved a certain way for this person does not necessarily mean you're going to grieve the same way for another person that leaves your life. And so I love what you're talking about like trying to be ready to reconnect with that person in this new form. And you have to kind of free up yourself to be able to hear that.
Yeah, and to know that nothing's gone wrong. This person dying, nothing's gone wrong. So it's allowing that. that as much as you are going to miss them or miss their presence in physical form, nothing's gone wrong. And if she'll just allow that thought to comfort her, it will help ease those times of grief.
Thank you for that, Michelle.
Yeah.
All right, so we have another question that came up in the thread. This person said, can you please ask Michelle to elaborate on the tension between the soul's experience and the human experience that she mentioned earlier? And do you have any strategies for mitigating this tension?
Yes. So tension, like attention or tension?
Tension.
Okay. So, well, there doesn't have to be any tension, number one. Let me say that. So, your soul comes in with kind of this broad, overarching intention or theme that it wants to experience. So, souls are curious and they're kind of have this innocent wonder about them, and they don't forget who they are. So they remember their power. They remember that nothing's gone wrong. They remember that this is temporary. So they're not scared. They're not playing in fear like humans are. So they come in with this really broad perspective. And then what happens is humans, they pop into this little baby body, right? And we landed here in physical. And then the part of us that isn't the consciousness that's in the human form is almost has kind of like a guidance system, if you will. And you can use that as inner knowing or emotions or thoughts. You're always in contact with this soul self. And this human gets to help create its life through the specifics. So say, for example, your soul is enthusiastic and joyful and adventurous and ready for a good time. Well, this human over here gets to decide what that looks like within this whole persona, the personality and the beliefs and the paradigms and all that stuff. So maybe excitement and adventure over here feels like travel, or maybe it could feel like rock climbing, or maybe it could feel like, whatever floats your boat. So when it gets really good and when it feels really good, both to the soul and to the human, is when we realize that the soul has this kind of broader perspective, like almost on the mountaintop, while the human's kind of down here in the trenches. We're not going to always be able to figure out the next step or the whole plan moving forward. We got to trust this soul that has the better view. And so this soul that has the better, broader view is going to like feed ideas and inspiration and good timing and insight to this human. And the human goes, oh, I got that. Okay, the next move is here. So it's this game of kind of trusting yourself and trusting your gut and trusting your intuition, which is guidance. That's human words for guidance. And that the next step and the next step and the next step, because your soul always wants you to be joyful. It wants you to match it, because when you're matching its vibration and its frequency, then the communication's even better. And it's almost like a blending that happens. And so there's like a merging that happens. You don't lose your personality. You don't lose all these wonderful, beautiful quirks about yourself, but your life becomes fuller and richer, and your human experience becomes fuller and richer. So you can trust all of that. So there doesn't have to be any tension. The tension is when we think we have to figure it out all on our own, or we're trying to figure out how to hear all this, or we're trying to figure out from the valley down here, this limited perspective, and not trusting these guidance that we're getting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for elaborating on that. And if you wanted to follow up to that question, please feel free to drop it in the chat here. All right, so this next person had asked, I've been doing lots of internal changes these past years, and people around me aren't being supportive. They're used to the old me that played by their rules. How can I continue to advocate for my own well-being when my support system keeps bringing me down? How can I feel empowered in order to keep moving ahead?
Yeah, so that happens sometimes when we change, right? The people who we love and interact with and who love us, they will have these kind of change back attacks, if you will, where they want you to go back to the person that they're comfortable with. And all that is their fear and worry and anxiety sparking, because you have changed your frequency, you've changed your energy with your thoughts, your behavior, whatever you're choosing to do, and they don't recognize it. So, which means either they've got to adjust to that frequency and match you there in order to still be in relationship, or they kind of spin off. So that scares them because it's new and different. So a couple of things is, number one, you stay in your own power. So you stay in your own energy. You maintain your own vibration, even though you can feel that they want something else from you. And you do that by saying, nope, this is who I am, and this is what I'm doing, and I'm okay with that. And I don't have to go back to being that. I can be who I am. And they will either rise to meet that frequency, or they'll spin off. They'll go do something else, or if it's a friend, you might find a different friend for a while. That stuff happens, and you have to be okay with that, because but anytime you think, so they're not really, I want to be really clear. If this person is matching that vibration, it's that they are matching it, that at a certain level, you're choosing to match the thoughts and beliefs and the frequency of this loved one. If they're bringing you down, as she said, because you're never a victim, it's always a choice. And so that's part of the empowerment. I mean, you can choose to match that and entangle with that, but it's a choice. So if you want to stay in this different frequency, that's a choice too. So take back your power, take back your ownership of your energy and your emotions, and choose it. And again, you can't get it wrong. You can match them if you want, and you can choose to stay in this new frequency. That happens a lot when people get new careers, or they lose weight, or they anytime there's a change, there's all sorts of ways to kind of sabotage folks. And people don't mean to do it. They're not necessarily, evil, or not, they just have a certain, they're used to being in a relationship with you in a certain way. And they want that comfort back, that familiarity.
Yeah, just because you're ready to grow doesn't mean other people are ready to grow around you, but that's not your concern. You have to focus on your growth, and the people that support you will be there whether it's familiar or not. And it's just important to keep coming back to the fact that this is something you need to do. And if it was something they needed to do, you would want to be supportive of them. So if they're not being supportive of you, then that probably tells you a lot more about them than it does about the changes you're making to your life.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean you have to write the person off either, because what happens is there's almost like a slingshot effect, right? Especially with people who are growing spiritually or emotionally. So what happens is, someone will kind of go forward, go forward, go forward, go forward, and the people that they love will kind of hang back. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But you'll notice, if you keep going forward, you keep going forward, you keep going forward, and it's with their soul's intention and their soul's journey, they'll scoot up to you. And there's not even anything you have to do. There's no convincing, there's no cajoling. It's just staying in your vibration. They'll scoot up to you. It happens more often than with kids and husbands and partners. It happens a lot when you can just maintain your own frequency. They'll rise to meet you because their soul is also encouraging that rise. So there's a lot of help on both ends of the spectrum, but that's really having to do a whole lot.
I love that. Thank you. All right. So we have about 9 minutes left in today's session. I'm going to try to get to all the questions that y'all had pre-submitted, because these are some really good ones. But we do have somebody asking if you have a book that you're working on and if you are on Instagram. So before we go any further, are there where can people contact you, or where can they follow what you've got going on?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So I have a book. So I'll even, it's blue, so it's easy to find. It's called The Little Book of Big Knowing. Tiny burst of insight to wake up your soul. And you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart.com, all those good places. And what it is little bitty bursts of insight that are kind of bite-sized, that you can read a little bit, put it down, read a little bit, put it down. I even encourage people to use their intuition and just to open the book randomly and see what's there for them that day. I think it's a great way to kind of hone in on listening to your inner wisdom. And I encourage people to, take what resonates, and if something doesn't resonate, chuck it. It's all right. That one thing's not for you, or it doesn't call to you, or you're not ready for it, and that's cool. But if anyone's interested in my work or classes or anything like that, they can find me at michellesammons.com. There's lots of free resources there. There's blogs and videos and all sorts of stuff. So, make yourselves at home.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah. And we'll share all that again at the end of today's session. So in about 8 minutes. All right. So this next person had wanted to know, how do you build confidence and learn to trust yourself and your intuition? I feel like this is an especially important question because, especially for the American audience, it's not really something we're taught, right? You're not really taught how to intuitively listen to yourself.
Yeah, so number one, to answer her question simply is practice. You got to practice. But what I want to say is everybody is intuitive. You do not have to be a professional intuitive to have intuition. It is part of the human package. Inner wisdom and communication is part of the game. What happens is we get here in this human life and we really love the logical analytical brain, this whole problem solving, figuring out thing, getting from point A to point B as fast as we can. We get sucked into that game. And you don't have to give up one to have the other. They can coexist together. And that's kind of how they're meant to, because you're in a physical life, you're in form. You have to know how to, zip your pants and drive a car. I mean, those are logical things, right? Um, so if someone is interested in intuition, I I I think one of the best ways to start to listen to your inner self is to tune out this outside world. And that can be through meditation, that can be through prayer, that can be through journaling, that can be, if someone's a movement person, that could be swimming or running or anything that's repetitive. Someone who likes crafts, that could be sewing or crocheting or knitting, anything that's kind of that repetitive motion. It doesn't have to be just sitting in stillness, like a formal meditation. But I suggest that that you start to develop a relationship with silence, because this world is, I mean, picture it like a casino with bells and whistles and lights and things going off, and your intuition is like a gentle breeze. It's subtle and it's quiet, and it's going to keep nudging you, but it's not going to grab you by the ear and say, listen to me. So you've got to be willing to get quiet. You've got to be willing to tune in. You've got to be willing to turn in order to hone in on that intuition.
Now, somebody had also written in asking about strategies to silence your mind. Could that be something like meditation, or are you talking like serious, like absolute physical silence?
So both. So, if you're trying to silence your mind, that usually they're asking about meditation, because that little voice is always going. That mind chatter is always kind of chirping, you will. Um, and what I find is you don't have to silence it completely. That's almost impossible for someone, especially if they're a beginner meditator. But it can recede into the background where it becomes like elevator music instead of, the thing that you hear all the time. And so it's learning. I do want to mention that this mind chatter and intuition will feel differently. So this mind chatter will feel like a loop. Even when you get into problem solving and fixing, it'll feel like you're in an analytical loop. It'll feel very much like you're in your headspace. It'll feel very much like you're going round and round. When intuition is present, it's going to feel like it drops in. It's going to feel like insight. It's going to feel like inspiration. Any artist or musician kind of knows what that is. It feels like it kind of drops in from the ethers. It feels different. It has a different vibe to it, if you will. And so will a sign from the outside. So, like if you're thinking about something and your spirit is going to use whatever is available. So maybe it's someone walks by you with a t-shirt that has words on it, and that message is like for you and you know it. And what it's going to feel like is like ringing a bell in a quiet room. Like when intuition or guidance or communication is coming, it's going to get your attention, and it's going to kind of stop you in your tracks a little bit. Even if it's just for a split second, you're going to notice it. The next thing is, do I choose to notice it? Do I focus on it? Do I listen to it? Do I trust it? That's where we tend to dismiss it. So I'm really trying to do a good sales job here. That you can use your intuition and your logical brain. So it's just taking the time and slowing down enough to notice it, and then to act on it. And that's going to come through practice.
Okay. So if we're trying to learn how to live this life of intuition, how do we do that without slipping into the cycle of burnout? And that's, a totally different concern in addition to, kind of trying to figure out your core values, right?
So my experience with intuition and intuitive living, there is no burnout, because you're not trying to figure it out. You're not problem solving. You're not wrestling with life. So you're not burning out. You're aware, you're alive, you're listening for the next thing, you're actually almost waiting for the next thing with this eager anticipation. So it's burnout's not really even an issue. Um, as for core values, that's a whole nother ballgame too, right? So, we all have different things that we value, whether that be, personal happiness or abundance or freedom or whatever that is. And that's just getting back to the basics of, what do I want? What do I want? What do I want? And the more you ask yourself that, the more you'll hone in on those things. The little things will lead to the bigger things.
Okay. Now, before we go for today, the last question I want to try and get to, because this was a really interesting one to me, is what is the best way to encourage others to find joy in their lives?
By being joyful yourself. Be the example of joy. Be you can't, as good as I'm doing as a sales job here, like, I can't convince anybody to be joyful. I can't say enough right words for someone to be joyful. You've got to be joy. You've got to be in that vibration, and then others will feel it. And what does she have? What's lighting her up? Why does she feel so good to be around? Why, when I'm with her, I always have a good time? Why does she say the exact right thing? Why does she make my ears perk up? Like, that's going to happen. And there are people in everyone's life where you just like to be with them, and you don't know why. You can't even necessarily put, you can kind of stammer around it like I'm doing, but it's the vibration that you're picking up on, and it's lighting something up in you. So that's all you got to do. It's all about being and not doing. It's all about being.
Well, Michelle, I just want to say a huge thank you to you for joining us today. This was a lovely chat, and it was so enjoyable to me to get to sit here and learn from you for an hour. Again, I'm going to share the link to your website. Can you tell us the title of your book again?
Yeah, so it's The Little Book of Big Knowing by Michelle Salmons, and you can get it on all the big players. But I so enjoyed being here with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of our attendees, all y'all that submitted questions before today's session, as well as the people that came up with great questions during. Thank you so much. The participation always makes this a much more dynamic experience. So thank you for that. We are at the end of our time today, but hopefully y'all have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. And I hope to see many more of you joining us on chats in the future. We've got a great schedule up the rest of this week, leading us into our May mini summit that happens the 3rd through the 6th. It's all free to attend. So please come back and partake of our resources. And hopefully y'all have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye, everybody.
Bye.